Yeah. I'm going to copy this. Okay. Now I have all the information here. But so I should say some of those information can be pretty space wasting. Okay. So like we have planning for 8 months, right? Planning for 8 months. And I'm just move this here. And then I'm going to get rid of this particular column, which is 1600. And overtime capacity. Do you know why this is 320? Why overtime capacity is 320? That is because the maximum capacity for the overtime is, I believe, 20% of normal production capacity. So since your normal capacity is 1600, 20% of this, 20% of this is going to be 320. Okay, and I don't think subcontracting is relevant for the first one. I'm not sure why this is giving me this, but let's get rid of it. So let's start from here, okay? Let's start from here. So in the highest level, we are comparing the difference between the demand and the availability. If you look at the cheat sheet I gave you today, I think the first two tables are just fine. There may be some adjustment needed for the last table, which is other equations part. Eventually, you have to break it down so that you have all the information you need to get the total demand, and all the information you need to get the total supply. Okay, if you did it already, which is good, you can just see how my approach is a little different than yours. There's actually more than one way to do this correctly. Okay, if you haven't done it, if you haven't done it, just try to learn as much as possible. Okay. Yeah, how do you figure out total demand? Total demand usually in our level, in my understanding, there's two things you can use. Number one, you look at here, not me. Can I? Cheat sheet? Yeah. Usually for the total demand side, you're looking into two components, like what is the current period demand that's arriving? And you're also thinking about the back order from previous period, if there's any. Okay, if there is any. If back order is allowed, that means whatever shortage from the previous period will come back, will become the part of the demand. Then usually you have to fulfill that first before you fulfill the current period demand. Okay, this is sort of like a liability that you always need to take care of first. And this is usually much more costly to fulfill. Number one, you need to do follow-up. You need to take initiative. And sometimes customer may not come pick up right away, right? So ended up, you need to hold it for additional days. That will incur some holding cost. And usually if you think about the project crashing cost, if you're short, if you're back ordered, usually you'll try hard to get that as soon as possible, maybe outside of your normal ordering frequency. So all those things considered, back order is usually more costly to deal with. So in some cases, a lot of cases, what they do is they just do cancellation instead of do the back order. That's what you see from Amazon, what you see from Home Depot, things like that. That becomes your total demand. Okay, and if you think about what's the total supply side, this is specific to your homework. The cheat sheet is specific to your homework. Okay, I mean, other problems, I cannot guarantee this can be used as is. But in general, you need to figure out, hey, what is total demand? What is total supply? Oh, here, we'll start with the beginning inventory, which is the previous period ending inventory, all right? And available inventory before additional efforts. That's beginning inventory plus your regular production. Okay, this part is determined by whatever strategy that you are using to pursue it. This should be determined in the S&OP phase. Should we use level strategy? Should we use demand chasing? Right? Should we use minimum workforce? So that's your available inventory before additional efforts. And I'm going to jump to 4. 4 is additional efforts. What's the additional efforts quantity? So how do you decide that? That's the minimum between unit short and the maximum capacity of your additional efforts. What does that mean? If you are 40 units short, your additional efforts maximum capacity is 200, meaning you can make people work overtime to get additional 200 unit, or you can subcontract up to 200 unit. 40 is the amount you need. 200 is maximum you can go. It's minimum of those, right? So you're only gonna make people work overtime to get 40. You're not gonna make people work overtime to get 200, which is maximum. It's not needed. No, it's not necessary. So that's the equation here. Minimum between those two numbers. Then how do you know what is the number of units short? That's the maximum between those two. If the demand is greater than the availability at that point, if the demand is greater than the availability, that's a shortage or overage. That's a shortage, okay? Then this will become a positive number. If demand is smaller than the availability, this will become negative number, meaning that you don't have a shortage. Okay, in those cases, you probably don't want to consider the number of units that's short. So that's a bigger among 0, but bigger between 0 and the difference between the demand and the supply, if that makes sense. Okay, some of you may want to use F function to fulfill this part. Some of you can just simply use max like I'm using here. Okay, and then total available inventory is before additional efforts plus the additional efforts quantity. That's basically becoming your total available inventory. Okay, so with that in mind, so this is my way of breaking down things. Okay, I don't think your textbook has this part embedded. I don't think any textbook has that information embedded. Okay, so this is what I learned by doing your homework in your perspective. Okay, so if I were you, I usually have to figure out what is the equation immediately before I need to get the solution. Right, so that is usually the difference between demand and supply. And then figuring out what is total demand, how to figure out total supply, that becomes critical. So with that in mind, let's take a look at this part, okay? So do we do this? We need to do actual production will be what? 1600, okay? Oops. 1600. Yeah, instead of follow my step, just focusing on how I am implementing those ideas here, okay? Because I'm going to be like I forgot the name, the hedgehog. What is that, hedgehog? The name, I forgot the movie name. Huh? Yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog. Okay, so I'm not that fast, but it'll be pretty fast. Okay, so yeah, here total demand is here. I don't need to worry about the back order here. So total demand is good here. Maybe should begin with beginning inventory here. Okay, it's beginning inventory. Remember, your homework does not require you to present to use an Excel spreadsheet to do this, but I believe this is a more productive approach. Beginning inventory. What is the beginning inventory we're beginning with? I believe it's 200, isn't it? Yeah. It's here, 200 from the previous period. So I'm going to begin with a 200 here. My actual production is going to be this one with absolute reference. Okay, and then your total available before overtime, which is going to be sum of those two. If that makes sense. Is there anything else we should consider total available inventory? So in some cases, like in chapter 14, we have those parachute orders. What is parachute orders? Those orders you placed way before this planning horizon that may arrive sometimes during this period. Okay, so those are scheduled order to be receiving in that specific period, but we don't have that here. So I think this is adequate. What else needed? Need to think about unit short. Unit short. How do you figure out unit short? Let's do this, okay? Unit short is the difference between the demand Does this look all right? You're negative 350 short. Does this look all right? Yeah, it has to be a positive number, right? So that'll make our planning easier. So that's what I'm saying. You should use maximum. Again, some of you may want to use f function if that's more intuitive to you. So here we're picking whichever that is greater between 0 and the difference between the demand and the supply. If demand is bigger, that number will be positive. If demand is smaller, that number will be 0. So that means you have no shortage there. Okay, so we got this here. Additional effort, which is our OT production. Okay, OT production. So OT production is usually trying to cover that unit short. So in here, we don't have to. So I know I wrote something here. I'm just going to put 0 here for now. Okay. And then what? Total supply. It's going to be beginning plus this plus this. Is that right? Or what you can do is you can say total available before OT. That can also become the total supply, total available inventories you can use. Does it make sense? Question? No questions? Yeah, and then you know what this is being used for. This is being used to figure out what is ending inventory. Ending, all right, inventory is, ending inventory is this minus this. Yeah. Supply, no, this one, minus total demand. So your total supply is 1800, 1400. That will give you ending of 350. So this will become your next period, beginning inventory. Okay, next period, beginning inventory, and you'll repeat the same thing. You repeat the same thing here. Total availability, the same. Unit short, the same. Overtime production, the same. Yeah. And total supply, the same. Ending inventory, the same. If you find that I made some mistake, just let me know, okay? Do let me know. I'm actually taking this as a new problem. I'm not doing this from memory. I can't memorize it because numbers keep changing. Yeah, I think with this completed, I can just drag it. So usually with aggregate planning, you need to complete first 2 rows because of this guy. So beginning inventory need to be carried over from the previous ending. Okay, so I need to drag it down. Yeah. So I don't think this is a perfect in first attempt. Remember, this is an iterative process. Okay, so let's see what's wrong here. So this definitely doesn't look right, isn't it? Is it look all right or no? Does it look alright or no? I don't think it's. See what's wrong here. The most obvious thing here is it didn't take this right. Okay, so I'm just gonna fix it for now. Okay, I'm just gonna put all the zeros here. And it still doesn't write because we need to determine what is the OT production in each case. So to figure that out, we need to fix this column, right? So remember, what's the OT? How do you determine what's the quantity for additional attempts, additional efforts? It's the minimum between number of units short and additional efforts maximum capacity. So in our case, there's a maximum capacity of 320 here. So let's say this is unit short in this period. Yeah, we cannot go all 550. We can only go 320 because there is a overtime maximum capacity we need to consider. So I'm gonna fix this to follow this equation right here, which is the minimum between the unit shortage and overtime capacity. I'm gonna absolute reference it. Okay, and let me see if this looks all right or not. Okay, so it looks like everything is just fine except this part. So our ending inventory may not be negative number. Okay, that means we are this many units short, even considering all the beginning inventory, actual production, but overtime production, still we are 230 short. Okay, if you ever allow back order, those will become back order to bother you in the next period. But we're not considering back order, luckily. Okay, so from there, you can infer two different types of information. Number one is, if the problem itself allows back order, what would you do? Ending inventory should be fixed as 0. 230 will need to be added to the current period demand to become total demand. Okay, but our problem description does not mentioning back order is allowed. Instead of, we're more interested in understanding what is the stock out cost. Okay, so this part will have to move to become stock out. Okay, will become stock out. So there's no stock out here, no stock out here, no stock out here, no stock out here. Okay, and here you have 230 stock out. How do you do that? I think it's going to be the maximum between 0 and stock out only happens when the demand is greater than the total supply. Okay, so if the demand is smaller, no stock out. This will be negative number. Therefore, this equation, when evaluated, will return 0. But here, we're getting 230. So what did I do? Yeah, I did correctly. So this part will need to be fixed into 0. Does it make sense? This part will need to be evaluated into 0 because no ending inventory is, there's no ending inventory there because we're having stock out happening. So anytime you see there's a negative where you're ending, they're just stock out. Okay, so I believe this will fix all the problems. I hope I got it right. Let's check, okay? $250. There's 100 unit off. Maybe I didn't write. Oh, the number changed. Darn it. Okay, but this will be the solution for the original number I have used. I mean, I'm trying to check with this, but as you can see, number has changed. It's like, this isn't really for this, but you got the idea. Okay, Yeah, there's no magic bullet here. You just have to break it down column by column, cell by cell. And I'm a big fan of creating additional dummy column or rows that can help you think straight. Okay, even though those are not provided. All right, that's especially so with this net requirement planning in the chapter 14. Usually the template give you like 6 rows you can use, but you can always add more rows depending on how it help you make understand this thing much easier, better. Okay, so I think this will follow very similar steps. Okay, follow very similar steps, and then I'm gonna move on to next one. This one is basically the same with. Oh, again, I'm sorry. So if you're wondering about the cost calculation, there's a bunch of cost calculation here. For the cost calculation, you have all the columns you need to do the cost calculation, like how to calculate stock out, will be the basis to calculate the stock out, and so forth. All right. I'm gonna move on to next one. Yeah, here, this will be the same problem, very similar problem with the handout that I gave you. So, like demand pattern wise, quarter, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm intentionally leaving this out because I'm gonna put 0 here. This is dummy row to help me think more clearly. Forecasting. Okay, so yeah, and then here you have a bunch of cost data. Yeah, we may not be able to complete this, but let's try it. So strategy A says what? Hires and fires personnel as necessary to meet the forecast. That means this is a demand chasing strategy. Okay? Demand chasing strategy. You hire and fire on demand. I didn't write demand. 1700, 1200, 1500, 1000. Previous quarter output is 1200. So this is your production capacity. Okay, so previous period, you have enough people for 1200. So if this is a demand chasing strategy, people, if this is demand chasing strategy, your production, yeah, this can be misleading. This is actually okay in demand chasing. So in demand chasing, the production capacity must meet the forecasted quantity at all cost. You must be able to fulfill this forecasted demand at all costs. Okay, by hiring or firing people on demand. That sounds a little mean, isn't it? Hiring and firing on demand. So 1700, so be it. All right, so you need to figure out what is the hire, fire. So with the baseline period, we don't have to consider that because we are left with a 1200. And with the quarter one, you started as 1200. You need to hire additional 500. Yes? With here, capacity must meet 1200, 1500, 1000. Okay, and then you look at this difference. If I were you, okay, to make it a little easier, I'll do this, previous capacity. All right, so just this. This probably will make your thinking process more clear. Previous capacity, you need to hire 500. Previous capacity 1700. What? I don't see the point. You see, exact 500 should be fired. And here, 300. 500. Do you see the game? Okay, so yeah, you need to understand what does it mean by demand chasing in this case. Okay, so I assume the rest of the problems will be very similar. Okay, this is the way I will break it down. Okay, okay.